So what do I need to read on these things?
You just need to call into order and look at the attorney.
Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, I was looking for, it's my bad. The reason I was waiting is I was waiting for Ramona. I didn't see Ramona, that's my bad. Okay, it is, according to my Apple Watch, it is 8:16. And I'm going to call the Real Estate Transportation Committee meeting to order. We have two items on the agenda. The first one that I have here is the 8th modification of a lease agreement with John J. Giroux Truck Broker Incorporated.
Thank you. Both of these items involve a Giroux company out at the airport at the Airside Center. The first one is Giroux Logistics Solutions, LLC. They're at 3200 Flightline Drive and are leasing 801 square feet on the third floor there. And they are asking to add 2 additional 5-year renewal options to their existing lease. That will bring the total of renewal terms up to 5 5-year renewal options. And the only other thing that this modification is doing is switching over from a CPI escalator to a flat rate escalator. So the base rent will increase under this second modification by 2% annually during the first three renewal options, and then we'll go up to 2.5% annually during the 4th and 5th renewal options. That's recommended for your approval. Chris from the airport is here if you have any questions about the company or the facility.
I think questions, yes.
Well, let me move to approve first. How about that?
Thank you. Second.
You know, with inflation as high as it is, why do we want to go with 2%? We got an opportunity to go CPI.
Well, we did that at the last meeting. The idea is to be consistent with all of the tenants out there. So we are moving from the CPI. Chris, were you about to
this is not this one isn't a CPI. It's a 2% already fixed.
Okay.
Agreement. And what we're doing is we're adding two 5-year options on there at 2.5%. So they're at 2% on their options that they have currently, and we're going to 2.5% when we're changing that.
So we're bumping them up a half point anyway?
Everybody, our goal is to get everybody in our leases to a 2.5% increase.
Okay.
But the CPI is definitely higher.
Oh, yeah, well, that's fine. I was just going to wonder why we would do that. There again, I understand some of this irrelevant. We're still going to bump up a half point, which...
Yeah, and I think we're trying to get, again, we're talking about the uniformity out there and getting everybody, and I have one of my good friends actually works there. They've been great tenants, I guess, for a long, long time out there, so certainly taking care of them is good. So, okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes. And then we have the second one, which is the second modification to the lease agreement with John J. Giroux Logistics, LLC.
And this is a sister company. It's John J. Giroux Truck Broker, Inc. This is 8th modification to their lease agreement. This particular affiliate is leasing 16,912 square feet on all 3 floors out at the Airside Center. They've been there since 2005. They are similarly asking to add 2 additional 5-year renewal options to their existing lease, which would bring it up to a total of 5 5-year renewal options. The base rent would increase by 2% annually during the first 3 renewal option terms, and then would increase by 2.5% annually for the 4th and 5th renewal options.
Move to approve.
Second. Move to approve in second. Any comments or questions?
Why don't we move them to 2.5 right now?
Because we're already in.
Oh,
we're in an agreement that was already negotiated in the past. So we're just adding.
Sorry.
You're going for a little extra money.
Yeah, I'm trying to help you out, Bill. Let me get back here now. They're out of Winter Haven or Auburndale. Is that where Drew's from?
I think they're residents.
They are local. They've got a branch in Ocala, and they do have a small one in Winter Haven.
Somebody got a monster house over Giroux over on one of the big lakes in Auburndale.
They have
Can't speak to that.
fire burned down an existing facility. Remember that?
That's why
A number of
they came
years
to
ago,
us.
a
That's why
fire
they
burned
came
down
to
their
us.
facility, and then they relocated to the airport.
That's right. I remember that now.
Commissioner Reed, would you like a map?
You bring one.
Well done.
Well, it did not take long.
He wanted you to ask.
Are they all in the same round building? Is it that one that they're still at?
Certainly are.
I mean, since you've got it, let's.
That building, I know where it's at.
Went to the trouble to bring a map.
Sit.
Yep, so here's a picture of the airfield down below. It's small, terminals up here. They're all the way on the south side for some reason. Yeah, if we can scroll. They're down here. So this is their space that they're in. It's the round building, it's 3,200. Off of Flightline Drive. You know, good tenants, pay on time, never complain.
They occupy 3 floors.
3 floors plus another little space inside here for their IT.
Okay.
Good tenant.
Are they the sole tenant there?
No, we actually have Tom Evans. They've got another 4,000 square feet on the 3rd floor as well.
Any other comments or questions? I have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approves. And at 8:22, I adjourn the Real Estate and Transportation Committee.
All right.
I tried to sign in again, stuff like that, but it wouldn't do it.
He'll be right back. He says he'll be right back.
So Bill, Julie, you know Giroux, right? Julie Giroux went to LCS. She was young and she was a heck of a swimmer. You know, 5'11", just and
Yeah, you don't have anything else on it?
that's the founder's granddaughter. Yep. And I don't know if you remember Bryson Yemnitz went to LCS, graduated with Remington. His dad, Dan, is a partner in one of the subsidiary companies.
Is that all offices then for them or some of that warehouse?
That's all offices. They pick up a phone and they have I shouldn't say very few, but they do a lot of, they don't have a whole lot of assets themselves. It's a lot of, they do a lot for public. Like Costa down in Miami, they do a lot of plans. So, how are you doing?
Good. Sorry, I missed y'all. Down, so I'm sure they can find a spot.
I think, yes, it might be a little.
presentations. We'll have one from ACE and then LPD. We have one proclamation for a Pet Hero Award, and it may sound a little light to you in that, but when you hear the story, I think you'll be more enthused. Then we go to committee reports, and we just did our Real Estate and Transportation Committee discussion, headed by Commissioner Music. And then that brings us to the consent items, which are the strategic planning retreat discussion. Any comments on that now at all? Where there are minutes from commission and utility. And then no equalization hearings. We go to public hearings, and that's really where you're going to kick off for a long dissertation this morning.
No slings or casts or anything. All right, so these are all second readings that you've heard about some before, and we have slides for any of these if you want to see those. The first item is the annual update to the capital improvements element of the comp plan. That's a requirement of state law that when you adopt your budget each year, then you bring your capital improvements element in your comp plan in conformance with your most recent budget. So that's what that's doing.
No questions on that, correct? Okay, next.
Second item is a change in zoning from single-family residential to low-impact office on 0.16 acres at 215 West Oak Drive. Again, that's the lot that's directly across from the Southgate Publix to the north. That is being proposed for multifamily co-housing for seniors and individuals with disabilities.
That was just mainly to line up the driveways. Is that the main function there?
It's changing the land use that's allowed on the property.
Well, I know, but they just, I had really objected. I didn't want it to infringe anymore in the residential component. And I thought a conditional use might be a better use for parking if we went that way as opposed to zoning it to commercial. But I think they've moved the building back to line up the parking lot, so it makes more sense that way. That's why I was just making sure that was the case.
And some of the amenities in the west side of the building would actually go on to the property that's being rezoned. So
Right.
Just a 40-foot strip, and so it does set everything up so that the buildings are more towards the west, lowers the encroachment issue in terms of parking, and allows the driveway to align with the Southgate driveway.
I mean, this is a straight rezoning, though, so there's not a binding site plan associated with it, but apparently they have submitted something already for review.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on that? 3.
All right, number 3 is a change in zoning from I-2 to Plainview Development. This is property directly to the north, across Drainfield Road from the airport. The property is currently zoned I-2, and there's I think it's about an 8-acre vacant parcel to the northwest, I believe it is, that the applicant, and this is the Ruthens that are applying for this, are wanting to add an aluminum manufacturing operation onto. So that's going to require not only the I-2 uses that are allowed in the PUD, but a limited amount of I-3 uses as well. And the ordinance specifies which I-3 uses are allowed, and only those I-3 uses are allowed, not just general I-3 uses.
Any questions? Next.
All right, next is the Lake Miriam Square apartment complex, and I think you probably all heard by now that the applicant is requesting a continuance until the April 4th meeting. Their traffic consultant is not available for the Monday meeting, and that's obviously a central issue in the case. So they have requested that continuance. Because this was noticed as a public hearing, so we already announced it at first reading that it was going to be a public hearing on Monday, and it's also been advertised in the paper. We need to open up the public hearing and take action, formal action on Monday, but in order to let the public know what's going on, I would recommend that the City Commission signal what their intention is on that request this morning, so that we can, Kevin can get the information out that you are or are not going to continue the case. I would recommend continuing it. Don't create any legal issues.
Can we continue it to the second meeting?
To the second meeting in April?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could.
I think we need to give our citizens, there's been a lot of input coming, and this is short notice for a continuance. I think we need to give our citizens another 2 weeks to rally their forces and stuff, in my opinion, and as opposed to if we can't do that, then we'll just go and do it Monday. But I understand what you're saying.
City Manager Strauss.
The only thing I would caution is we probably would want to be able to talk to the applicant just to make sure that their professionals that they will need in the room would be available for that date. So I think we would, before we made that decision this morning, we probably would need to check that if we're going to move it to.
Well, I'm more concerned about the citizens than I am for the applicant between me and you, but
I understand,
maybe
but
move back further than that if he can't be there then.
Well, and that's what if we're going to pick another date, though, we probably want to coordinate to see. We may run into the same exact issue. I don't know if, for instance, a transportation professional would be available on whatever date we pick. We could find that out, and we could announce that if you want to give some optional dates that we could ask them to consider.
That's my preference. Now,
Okay.
I don't know what.
Thank you, Mayor. So the action we would take Monday, Palmer, would be a vote on the continuance officially.
Correct. And ideally, you not only continue it, but specifying what date you're continuing it to.
Okay. To me, it doesn't matter if it's the first meeting in April or the second one. I think it's enough time. So I certainly would want to make sure those who need to be at the meeting can, but I don't have a strong preference either way. But I do think it's enough time if you do it the first Monday in April.
We've got to put it in the newspaper and everything else too.
Commissioner Music.
Yeah, I just think that it is paramount that they're there. I mean, yes, I agree 100%. It's geared towards the citizens, but giving them the information is paramount. So I would be willing to be at whatever week that they can be there. But I do.
Let us contact the applicant after agenda study today, find out if they're available in that second April meeting, and then we'll let you know on Monday. But if you could, just give a thumbs up or down on the continuance of Monday's hearings.
Yes,
We will, let's continue.
And for citizens, just to keep it simple for them, this would not be the meeting to come to then.
Right.
It's important that they just wait until we know that date, which we'll talk
We'll know
about
on Monday,
and we'll know Monday, and then they
Well,
can.
you know that Monday will not
We
be.
can announce that date.
I got a lot of information that people said it's still on the agenda. Of course, when I read it, I went to ask Tracy, why is it still on? But I didn't read. She said, oh, it's bold. I said, it doesn't look bold to me. But it's
Well, it's bold with a smaller font, right?
Again, though, it was noticed, and that's why it's on
Yes.
the agenda.
Yes.
Because people mentioned that to me a couple of days ago
Yes.
before.
It was noticed.
Somebody knew before I did, but that doesn't.
Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner Cloud.
Well, and just to that point, if people wanted to come to the meeting, they can speak at the end during the public comment
Yeah, absolutely,
period.
correct.
It's not on the record, it's not part of the public hearing, but it's still, they have that
Absolutely.
Right,
opportunity.
and that's an important consideration that you make. We can't use any of that information stated in those
Right.
for any application of use in this, which is why you probably want to save those comments for when it matters, but they certainly have that prerogative. You're absolutely correct. Thank you. Number 5.
Can I just, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So you want us to offer either of the April meetings to the applicant to see which meeting, your preference would be the second meeting, right? Is that my understanding?
That would
be the first.
Yeah.
I may not make the fourth meeting, but I'm just, I may have a conflict, but I'm trying to work on that. So.
But either of the April meetings, the sooner the better, because we just don't want it to be a continuing issue for citizens.
So I thought your preference was the second April meeting, which was that the 18th?
Well,
That's my
that's
preference.
what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, but everybody else would rather just continue it as they requested
Yes.
to the April 4th meeting.
Yeah.
So then we're good. I mean, because that was their request to go to the meeting, so they're ready.
Okay, so this would come on April 4th.
Okay.
If that's the case, we'll just let the applicant know it's being continued.
Continued, right.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5.
Number 5 and number 6 go together. Number 5 is the comp plan land use change amendment for this application, and number 6 is the PUD rezoning of the property. 5 changes the land use on the property from NAC to residential high. It's 17.2 acres. That affects, and then another smaller 1.5 acre parcel is being changed from neighborhood activity center to convenience center for CC. And the zoning is application of PUD zoning on this property. It's for 252 multifamily apartment units on the 17.2 acres. That 1.5 acres, I think, is not in the applicant's control, so that will be designated for something in the future. But for now, the zoning is in reference to that 252-unit apartment complex. This is at the corner of West Pipkin and Yates Road.
And the applicant has also provided a formal presentation that they would like to deliver on Monday as well. So we have that uploaded and ready to go.
Will the applicant be here to provided themselves, okay. And this is a quasi judicial hearing, just like the Lake Miriam one, so. And there is opposition, I understand, at least from the Planning and Zoning Board hearing.
Yes. Commissioner?
I have a question. I have a question on 4 and 6. Do you know what are the net usable acres on number 4 and also number 6?
Number 4. Let me look.
It's 12.07 total.
Yeah. I don't think we specifically looked on either of them at the net. We've been working off of the gross, which is the 12.7 for Lake Miriam. And then,
Can we get a net number?
sure.
And I'd like to know the parking ratio too, please, sir.
Okay, we will do that.
Great, thank you. Anything else on 5 or 6? All right, that brings us to resolutions, 6B1.
6B1 is a resolution related to Polk County's job incentive program called the Polk County Bonus Incentive Program. There is a business that is proposing to bring a number of jobs, high-paying jobs, to downtown Lakeland. I'm going to let Jason talk about this project and the program.
Good, thank you, Palmer. So Project Horizon is a project that is looking to purchase and occupy a building that is downtown. Confidential project that we've been working with for a good period. As part of that project, they're committing to the creation of 100 new jobs that'll be associated with this. The jobs are going to pay a wage that's equal to 200% of the average annual wage, so around $93,500, so a great wage. Part of that commitment, and so if we haven't talked about the PCBI component, QTI historically had been the economic development job creation incentive that we've talked about. PCBI is a local incentive. So it was one the county had developed, Polk County Bonus Incentive, that is a 50-50 match. So the county matches 50%, qualifying cities would do the other 50%. So with this project being within the city of Lakeland, we're splitting this with the county. So the incentives that are provided in that program are all tiered. They're based on higher wages. So $1,000 a job if you pay 115%, $3,000 a job if you're 150, and it goes up to $5,000 a job for 200%, which is what this one pays at. So 100 jobs at $5,000 per is a $500,000 incentive that we will split 50-50 with Polk County. So the resolution that Palmer's reading commits the city of Lakeland to $250,000 with a payout period of 3 years.
Yes, Commissioner McKenna.
Where's that?
So qualified target industry used to be the state of Florida's through DEO and Enterprise Florida. It's sunsetted in 2020.
Okay.
And so we're waiting on that state component of an incentive to come back, but today it doesn't exist.
Okay.
It's the only method we have today.
Okay.
Correct. Commissioner Music.
And where do those funds come from to pay them?
So we are budgeted annually, so the QTI incentives that we mentioned. So the payout periods for these projects can vary, and sometimes it's 3 years. When we did Public's headquarters several years ago, that was a 10-year payout. So we budget an annual allocation from the general fund to the payout. I think today we might have less than 10 outstanding projects that still have some variations of payment. Some of them are as little as $1,200 or $1,500 a year. This is obviously a little bit of a bigger one, so we'll talk to finance and make sure that we've got the right amounts in there to cover once these are audited and proven to be created, so they're eligible for payment.
And they're relatively self-funding because they are self-funding because of the creation of jobs. Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, Jason, how often have you had projects qualify under this?
So it's uncommon, which is great, and I think that 200% level is uncommon. Different economic times and maybe pre-COVID, we would see 3 or 4 QTI qualified projects per year. Sometimes we don't see anything after we get to this point. So y'all have an opportunity to approve a resolution, but really it's up to the company to perform. And so if they don't perform and they don't meet the wages or the job numbers, we're not going to come back, we're not going to talk about it again, but maybe they fall off. So this is definitely a great project.
It's only a win.
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner.
So we don't know if they're coming yet, and we don't know where they're going.
So part of the competitive process is the application process. So we go through that with the company. They will say, we have an interest in Georgia, we have an interest in North Carolina, other areas. So this is really us putting our hat in to be competitive for the project to show that we want them in Lakeland.
Any other questions on that? Great. Thank you for your work on this. That brings us to C1.
All right, the next item is an interlocal agreement for the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. At the last meeting, the City Commission indicated its desire to exempt LAMTAD from paying tax increment revenue into the CRA's trust fund. And under Florida statutes, in order to implement that, you got to enter into an interlocal agreement with LAMTAD. So that's what this is doing. The interlocal agreement specifies that we're required to specify the duration of the exemption under the statute, so that just specifies that it's indefinite unless
It's changed.
by mutual consent of LAMTAD and the city, it's changed.
Right.
So this just implements what the City Commission indicated they wanted to do at the last meeting.
Questions or discussions on that? Any comments? Commissioner McCraw?
The only reason why I make a big deal on the agreement about sole discretion is not that the city has unilateral control over this. I mean, it is a mutual agreement between the parties, but there's a statute that calls for this. Has two ways to exempt a special district like LAMTAD. One is just in the local government sole discretion, and the other says at the special district's request. And if you do it that way, you go through this long public hearing process, you have to make all sorts of findings. So I just try to make this as easy as possible. That's why I'm talking about sole discretion in that agreement.
And I think the tone of this, just as a reminder, is the confidence on both parties' parts to work towards what we want to accomplish, but the flexibility to do what also may be needed from time to time. And so if that were ever not occurring, it's an easy thing to what's the term on this if we wanted to change it? Is there a minimum term?
No, there's no minimum term.
Right, so that's addressable. Okay. Any other questions? C1.
All right, I think we're into utility at this point.
Got in the room in time. Good job. We're flying and you went, oh boy.
All right, the first item is a proposed agreement with Annixter, Inc. For the purchase of 5 kV cable for the Unit 3 repowering project at the McIntosh Unit 3 location. Unit 3 has been used up to now as the power source for internal McIntosh facilities out there. So obviously that's been demolished, and we're going to have to come up with a different way to do that. That's what this is providing for. It's for the purchase of 22,000 feet of cable to develop a different power source for the McIntosh internal facilities out there. Purchasing Department has put this out for bid and received 2 responses. Annixter out of Lakeland was the low bidder at $468,950. They were evaluated by staff and determined to not only be the low bidder, but their bid was responsive and they were a responsible bidder. The product delivery would occur in May of this year and would be installed over a period of 6 to 10 months by several different contractors beginning in June. Again, the total cost for this cable is $468,950, and that's included in Lakeland Electric's FY22 budget. Dave Holdner from LE is here if you have any technical questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, yes, sir. Commissioner.
So we're just purchasing cable from them. This isn't an install or anything. This is just the cable? This part. So, I mean, they're not cable manufacturers, are they? Why are we not buying it like from a manufacturer, buying it through like a third party?
They were low bid and Dave made
Okay, so it didn't matter. Okay.
We put the bid out, and a lot of the cable manufacturers, they make us go through their suppliers.
Anyway, okay.
How big is this cable? Just
It's 500 MCM, so roughly 2.5 inch diameter.
Okay, I thought it might be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's 4160 cable, so it's a semiconductor, and each lead can carry around 400 amps. So the reason why there's so much is there's multiple strands in each circuit to reach the ampacities that we need.
Got it. Interesting. Any other questions? All right, number 2.
All right, number 2 is for the purchase of 2 pre-engineered buildings that will be used to house the new RICE engines that we're going forward with, as well as some ancillary operations. The first building that will be approximately 115 feet wide by 230 feet long and 50 feet tall. That will house the actual 6 RICE engines, their generators, and associated equipment. The second building will be 48 feet wide by 122 feet long and 20 feet tall. That was going to house some of the ancillary equipment like the switchgear, motor control center, batteries, and the local control room for that project. The city's purchasing department issued an invitation to bid for these buildings and did not receive any responses. So the purchasing department then sent out the bid directly to 4 different companies that they knew were involved in this type of work. And they only received one response as a result of that, and that was from Patterson Horth out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Got a bid price of $5,391,300. Their bid was evaluated by city staff as well as Sargent & Lundy, which has been involved all along with this RISE project as consulting engineers. And they determined that Patterson Horth did have the qualifications to provide what we need for this project. The engine building, the building that will house the RISE engines, will be delivered in November of 2022. And the ancillary electrical equipment building will be delivered in October of 2022. And then both buildings will be erected by a contractor that we will select later by another competitive selection process. Total cost of the work, again, is $5,391,300. That's included in Lakeland Electric's budget through the energy system revenue bonds that we issued for the RISE project. Again,
These are steel buildings, not concrete,
Correct.
which is why they can be on order and you know the dates work.
Correct.
Okay. And the engines arrive when?
July 12th. They're still on schedule. The problem that we're feeling right now is just like everybody else with the supply chain problem and COVID and things. And these are delayed, and that's one of the reasons why we didn't get the bids and things. But we already have a plan in place. MAN's planning on bringing the engines in, building them up. We'll store them in the old cold yard. And then when we're ready to set them on the foundation, we'll move them over at that time.
You couldn't put them on the slab in advance of the building?
My slab's not built yet. My slab's running a little bit behind because we had the site relocation. And right now, the DEP is backed up on site permitting. And so we're dealing with those fund issues also. And so I'm a little bit behind on that. And then the other contractor that Palmer mentioned was the general contractor. We're working on getting him on board. We hope to bring you a proposal by April so we can get them on board to start doing the undergrounds and build the foundations.
Got it. Wow, that's interesting. Commissioner Raymond, sorry.
You know, this is $166 a square foot. Why don't we get a tilt wall?
Part of the issue here for the going between the tilt wall and also from the pre-engineered buildings is the insulation and the sound attenuation. And just the way the structure is for the tilt wall and the sound attenuation, they didn't think that they could meet it.
What's our slab going to cost us? Couple million?
No, it's more than that. I think the slab portion is right at $3 million.
This would be the thickest slab you've ever
Oh,
poured.
well, it's going to be big. You know, I just got a metal building with red iron, and I'm about $51 a square foot with slab and everything. But this is obviously a bigger building. I just can't figure out why it's This is just delivered. It's not even erected. There's nothing there. I don't know why we can't find somebody else to do it for a lot cheaper or do a different type of building. This is just. That's absurd.
Trust me, I will. We were flabbergasted when we put out the bid in November, and we gave them extra time because of the holidays to get the bids in January, and we got none. That was a surprise to us. When we reached out to the 4 particular bidders that build these RISE buildings, one of them came back immediately and said, we can't do this. We have too many people on COVID. The other 2 thought that they could do it, but they couldn't because of the problems with COVID. And so we ended up getting the one bid. The difference between the building that you built and the building that we're building is mainly it has to support a 6-ton crane that runs the entire length of the building. And that's installed with it. It's a very tall building. It has a HVAC system that allows for the system building to be ventilated to remove all the heat and any kind of gas leakage or anything that we might have from a little leak. It has to support other structures within there, the cable trays and things like that. And then obviously the insulation on the outside is a big deal. I mean, that was a premium upgrade. These walls will be 8 to 10 inches thick just to handle the noise. And so that's a lot of that.
So you got a lot of costs in there that you wouldn't typically have otherwise.
We also, before we get off that point, we also had Sergeant Lundy, correct me if I misstate, but we had Sergeant Lundy check this. They vetted this and they compared it to Tallahassee, I believe. And they also came back with a price increase table that told us how much each component had increased since then. And if you go back then and compare it to Tallahassee, they used Wardzilla, but it's a very similar building. If you go back and compare it to their cost and then you escalate the price, it's very close to what you would expect it to be. So we had our owner engineer vet that. So just because we only had one bid, we were concerned that we might be, that it might be outlier because of that. But Sergeant Lundy said this is probably what, if we'd had other bids, they would have probably been in the ballpark.
Since October of 2020, the pre-engineered metal building has seen a 89% increase. And
I just thought in January it didn't cost me that much, but
we know there are a lot of buildings in this.
They're 367,000 pounds of it.
We know there are a lot of buildings in this area and people have experience with this kind of buildings, but this is a very different building than the ones that we build around here to store stuff in. This is a very different.
Well, and all of the idiosyncrasies are expensive. Yeah, it's not the cheap things, yeah.
Steel.
Pat Patterson Morris also is the manufacturer that supplied the building for Tallahassee also. And that was one of the other things is not all the building manufacturers have the know-how to build what's required for the Rice engines because of that sound situation. You still have all these huge penetrations in the wall from the exhaust duct, the intake duct. The building ventilation itself, I mean, along one wall, we're going to have 12 ventilators to make sure we maintain the temperature inside the building. That's huge. I mean, that's a whole wall that basically has to support itself because the ventilation are going to be holes in those walls. So
The batteries that are in the ancillary building, are those for starting the units?
those are for backup power for the control systems to make sure that electrical blip doesn't cause an issue. And even though we aren't building these units to be a NERC certified Black Start unit, these units will have the ability to Black Start. That's one of the things that we planned for here.
Excellent. Wow. Any other comments? Commissioner McCall?
I was just going to say, so they're all in one building. We're not doing individual buildings. We're doing all of the generators in one building. And then I was just going to echo everything you said. This is not the foundation alone, I can't even imagine the weight that it has to be prepared. So that makes total sense to me that it would cost that much because we're on sandy soil. So you're going to have to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce just to have the weight of those generators, those engines.
And that'll be included. Right now, they're looking at, we have to sink more than 400 piles.
Right.
To support the weight, and that'll be under the general contractor's cost. That'll be the next biggest one that we bring you. This is more than what we had planned for this building to cost, but the plan was put out before COVID.
Right.
Okay, and so, and this is still within our budget with the contingency that we have for what we brought to the commission in the first place. But we expect increases there also.
Thank you for being conservative, though, in the beginning, because I remember y'all set aside, which was smart.
Well, and, the Rice engines are the right decisions.
Right.
That's a wonderful decision going forward. The next most important decision we make is that this building is as quiet and functional as possible and not to have to get back in it again.
And safe.
We are going through that right now. Preliminarily during the initial bid spec, we paid an extra option price to put an extra silencing for the engines. And as the design has been solidified, we have some extra silencing that we have to do, and we're dealing with that right now. And I was very clear to MAN and Sergeant Lundy, this project to be successful has to be quiet. We are not going to disturb our neighbors. I said, if we get a complaint across the water, then we failed. Well, that's where we're headed.
Thank you for your prep in it. Any other questions? All right.
The last item is also related to the RISE project. This is an agreement with PTI Transformer LP for a generator step-up transformer for that project. This will connect the power from the RISE project into the Interlocal 69 kilovolt substation and will convert that 69 kV down to 13.8 kV to allow the connection to be compatible. The city's purchasing department issued an invitation to bid for this in January. Received responses from 3 contractors. The low bidder that was also deemed to be responsible and responsive was PTI Transformer out of Winnipeg, Canada, and their bid price was $2,249,000. Again, they were evaluated by city staff as well as the consulting engineer, Sergeant in Lundy, that's been on board for the RISE project all along. They were determined to be a responsible bidder. The equipment will be delivered, I guess it's more of a longer lead time item, but it will be delivered in June of 2023. I believe the contractor will actually design, fabricate it, install, test, soup to nuts for this. The cost of this, again, $2,249,000 is included in Lakeland Electric's budget, I believe for not this fiscal year, but the following, and is also funded through that Energy System Revenue Bond. Am I correct, David? This is soup to nuts. This is everything.
That is correct. That's correct. So the two top bidders was PTI and Hyundai, and with everything that's going on in Ukraine and also with the markets in Asia, just the shipping part of it, we didn't want to take the chance.
Smart.
But that besides itself, even that shipping issue, that besides itself, PTI was still the best evaluated bidder. That was just, if they were close, we would have ended up going with PTI anyway. But yes, they are going to supply complete. This is the transformer that brings power in. It'll provide auxiliary power to keep the plant powered up while we're offline, and then we're online. It'll transmit the power from the generators to the grid to Interlocal.
And it does a dual step in that.
Yeah, exactly right, Mayor. It's we have 2 secondaries, and the reason why we brought in 2 secondaries is that's one fold is for the safety aspect of it. By having the dual secondaries, that makes less risk and exposure to the employees when they're doing switching operations for arc flash. I know you guys many have heard the term before, which is very dangerous for the gentlemen. So that's one of the reasons. And then it also gives us the ability from a maintenance standpoint that we could actually take down half the plant, do maintenance, and still keep half the plant running, where before we couldn't do that. So the only time we would have to take down the whole plant is when we're actually doing this transformer testing. So that's advantageous to us.
Great.
How big is the transformer?
As far as physical size,
About the size of this room?
yeah, probably. Maybe a little smaller when it's fully dressed out.
Commissioner Music.
I just like to see, as somebody who works on bids a lot, I always like to see these numbers so tight. I mean, it's, even though there's some variance in the shipping and whatnot, that always lets us know that we're getting some good service. So thank you.
This also was another one of those that we've been bit by the COVID bug. This exceeded our initial projection. To give an example, this transformer is roughly the same size, the one that we purchased for Mac GT2 when we installed it, and it's double the cost.
And that, how long ago was that?
That was 3 years ago. Yeah, something like that. And it's double. And then, like I said, like Mr. Music put out, all of them are in line. So it isn't like somebody's trying to rip us off.
Right. Excellent. All right, that brings us to the audience portion, which is not audience here, and the mayor and city commissioner comments, which really brings us to our comments. Anything that anybody wants to share before the weekend?
I had one other item about the duck hunting issue, if you want to go into that now or later.
Absolutely. No, I'd love to have you do that. Sorry, didn't realize that.
Okay, no problem. It's not on the agenda, but I've been in conversations with FWC about a potential workshop with the city commission, and what they've advised is that they're happy to provide information to us about more general hunting issues and ecology issues and how many ducks you can take on a particular hunt. But when it comes to establishing a potential restricted hunting area, that all they would do is refer us to the Florida Administrative Code, the procedures that are set forth in there, and I guess that's understandable. They didn't want to be involved in a local political issue. That's got to come from us, and then they would assess what we do. Right. What the Florida Administrative Code provides is simply that if a local jurisdiction wants to propose a restricted hunting area in RHA, that you have to adopt a resolution setting forth the legal description of the restricted hunting area or areas. You have to commit to enforce that area by your local law enforcement. FWC would not participate in enforcement of that RHA. And then you have to post signage to notify the public that that is an RHA. So the bottom line is that I don't think a workshop at the FWC will be productive with respect to what the City Commission is considering. So I'm kind of looking for what you want to do. Is it the desire of the City Commission to maybe have staff come back with maps and stuff to show where our different lakes are and the residents around the lakes, and have a staff-led workshop without the FWC, or not do anything, or I'm just looking for direction.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Are there other communities that have these type of resolutions ordinances? Like, are there best practices? Are there ways to look at these other entities to see how they deal with it?
I think it's been pretty ad hoc, and I know that the FWC has been exploring revising their rules to make something more consistent. And from my conversations with them, it sounds like they've
stalled.
I don't know that stall's the right word. I think they're no longer moving forward with any kind of rulemaking procedure. So it is a somewhat ad hoc process, a lot of discretion.
So didn't Winter Haven just recently have something like this too?
I don't know what Castleberry is.
Castleberry, I think Winter Haven is a bird sanctuary from a long time ago, maybe, but.
So we would ask staff to take a look at existing restricted hunting areas, ordinances that have been done, or is this?
It's easy enough to get, it's a resolution, but I can get Castleberry's, and I think there's been a few others as well that I could get a hold of. But it's got to be, specific to, you're looking at the.
So we would then turn and apply that to our.
Which that's what if we looked at something, I would like to see what their Castleberry's issue was that made them do the RHA. You know what I mean? Like, are they in a neighborhood as well? Like, how does that look? Because I think for us, we have some lakes are easily accessible and it makes sense. And then some, you're closer to houses. So I would need to know like the parameters with which they worked in to get to that answer. And if they have RHAs on specific lakes, what's around those lakes? What does it look like? How close in proximity is it to a neighborhood?
Sure, I can get you that. I can tell you that it was the same issue. It's just, they had lakes with a lot of houses around them.
And if it were I'd like to be interested in ones that might be of a portion of a lake. Because you take a look at Lake Parker, we wouldn't necessarily want to do all of Lake Parker. We'd want to do the area near the houses. Yes, Commissioner Lee, who has a vested interest in it.
Unfortunately, I went to my neighborhood meeting, and this has been an ongoing topic for a while, and I'm quite sure they're going to come be here at our next meeting, and we'll speak afterwards. And I know it's what's this different scenario about a sanctuary versus the RHA? And of course, there again, I had made a proposal to Sean that he said that he would confer with you to see if that would be something that would work, and that was if we give the HOA to put out feeders per se, and during that open window of season, which is only 60 days, and they fed them, then that would be a baited area, and if they came out and shot ducks in a baited area, then they would you could take their gun, their car, their truck, and everything else, which would deter duck hunters from coming there. But again, the RHA may be
them. You're saying the neighborhood association would.
Well, again, you can't feed wild animals. There again, you can have out feeders.
Right. Okay.
But you can't feed. There's a different scenario about feeding wild animals. Of course, we have deer feeders and turkey feeders and all the other pig feeders. But I don't know. And there are duck feeders and there's fish feeders. But I just didn't know what the parameters were to curtail this issue. And if you ride around the lake and
It's deadly, isn't it?
Timing is everything.
She's listed somewhere. Invariably, if you ride around that lake, there are hundreds of ducks on the sidelines, and they're in people's yards. And it's just one of the species, and maybe it's just because it's wintertime. But they're there all the time, and it's not just mallard. This one species of ducks. But I would like to pursue it to see what we can do.
Pursue what exactly?
Well, both find out about that RHA and the sanctuary component, and it's only that little cove. It's
Talking about the one that's
down behind the church, and it just goes. It's a smaller area, and it's like I mentioned. So why don't you hunt on the other side of the lake? And their comment was, "There's no ducks there."
Which makes it harder to hunt.
Sure, and that's why.
It's difficult to be successful. You can hunt.
And I'm hearing from the sporting arena that there's going to be multiple hunters next year. They know they're there, and they've seen about it, and it's going to be a bigger problem.
That's why we should work on this.
We need to
now.
address it before it becomes a bigger issue. Somebody may get injured somewhere.
Either one.
I was just, with your neighborhood meetings, are they concerned about hunting in general or hunting in proximity?
They're hunters, but it's the proximity to their homes and stuff. And there's some rule they were saying is you can't go within 1,000 feet of some areas. There's 300 feet of some areas. And then they cited our code and they hunted some other. They would, you know the lady I'm talking about. And she got all kind of information, but I'd like to explore it more just so we don't have an issue down the road.
And we have time, and we should get it done while we have the time on our side. Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, and I had mentioned this in our meeting. I would have reservations about putting restrictions on legal duck hunting. And so I wonder, are there communities that have approached this or dealt with the issue without creating an RHA? And I know, there may be others who feel differently, but I think it does lead to other ramifications for your duck hunting community. And I think the hunters who spoke at the meeting, I thought they had some compelling arguments. And so I just want to be mindful of that as we move forward with this. So Palmer, just putting that into, as you're formulating kind of where we go, at least from my perspective.
I hunt ducks.
And that kind of solution would be baiting, feeding the ducks in that corner of the lake, and then they can't be hunted.
I think in theory, it's creating a restricted hunting area. That sounds good, but then I wonder where that leads in additional lakes and other communities. And so I think it's a bigger picture than just that section of Lake Parker. While I understand where the residents are coming from, and if I were in their shoes, I'd probably feel the same way. So
It's precedent.
yeah.
Any other comments on that?
So is the desire for a workshop? There is not a desire for a workshop?
Just
Well, we want
general information?
Is come back with info for us.
Okay.
Because if they aren't going to be at the workshop, if they don't want to be present, we don't need them there. We need to know what precedents exist in the state, what decisions have been made that have worked, what kind of baiting, what kind of feeding.
Commissioner Reed and I had that conversation, and it is really more for probably Palmer to look into, but my understanding is that if the hunters themselves are part of baiting a field, that's the transgression. If the hunter, because like for instance, if you got a hunter who puts in on some other portion of the lake, they don't know if the neighborhood's feeders are full, you're presupposing that they have a way of knowing that it's baited. And so I think the hunters themselves, from some past experience that I've had, have to be a part of baiting the field, and it can't just be that if the neighborhood puts out feeders, then that somehow restricts hunters from coming into that area.
There is a split of opinion about that.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing to know and present to us. RHAs would be probably the most definitive way we could accommodate both parties. Let's take a look and see if there's partials or fulls that exist, and bring them back and talk to us about it. But we could do it on a Friday morning meeting, on an agenda study meeting.
I guess the other thing they were upset about was when the fishing game went out there, they were hunting with lead shot, which is supposed to be steel. They were hunting without licenses, and they got warning as opposed to citation, which is another upsetting thing. And I haven't been that fortunate when I've been.
From your past experiences as well.
That's because they know you're a professional.
Because, and to answer your question, we've dove hunted the same areas, maybe not known each other, and if I go on a field that I don't know is baited, and I'm shooting dove, and they come out and it's a baited field, they're gonna write you a ticket. And you're subject to losing your gun and everything else. Just because you don't know it's baited does not preclude the law.
That's
And,
exactly
but
right.
if they know it's baited and then come out there, then they're probably subject to some more serious ramifications.
So that'll all be good to know. Thank you.
Palmer's gonna be an expert on hunting.
There's a couple of issues that have come up lately that I never thought I'd be dealing with.
That's why we like you, Palmer.
Yes. All right, anything else on any other party's part? All right, then we adjourn. Thank you.
Just as you've all received, I think in your emails, it'll be noon today. And just a reminder that unlike in past years, just look for the City of Lakeland tent that'll be on the first base side this year, over where most everybody entered for the barbecue. And just go there. Parks and Rec will have everything that you need, and we'll get you out on the field and ready for the ceremonies.
Okay, thank you. All right. Appreciate your time and presence.
How are you, sir?
Great.